Good evening. So, when Rabbi Teldin asked me to speak, I had to think about what it was. And I have to tell you that community has come up very, very sharply for me over the last 6 months, a year. Community, when I was younger, it's something, you're in it. But it was never very personal for me. I participated, sometimes very enthusiastically, but I didn't own it. I grew up in New York, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island, Knicks and Giants. I have to tell you, this weekend, I rooted for the Cowboys. I wanted Eli to do well, but I rooted for the Cowboys. I am a Texan. Okay. About 1978, I was building a business with a partner. We built a chain of stores, a pretty nice sized chain. We didn't have much money. In fact, it wasn't even much money for $1978. So how did we build it? We built it with sweat equity. That means we were working about 100 hours a week. I wasn't the nicest guy working 100 hours a week. And about that time, I was starting to question, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I had a severe conflict of ethics, is what I'd like to call it, with my partner. I found myself on his desk ready to remove his larynx, and I froze. And I said, you know what? The business is yours. We'll figure out how you buy my half. I'm out of here. And I need to do some thinking. What am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was so totally involved, so totally enveloped in this business. So what started out as a 3-day camping trip, I figured I'd go off with my dog in the hills, and it turned into a run to Florida. I ran from New York to Miami. Yeah, I'm certifiable. And it gave me a lot of time to think. I was alone for 40 days for 23 out of every 24 hours. And it's amazing the things that come up in your mind, past things, new things, the meaning of life. And it started getting me in touch with, what do I want to be when I grow up? Who am I? What do I belong to? It was many times I was under some very severe conditions, whether heat or cold or rain, sometimes tremendous thirst because where are you going to get water when you're miles from something? There were a number of times along the way that I actually felt as I was touched by God, who literally lifted me up and carried me the way I had to go. 15 years, we moved forward. I'm on the learning process, and I'm doing business in Russia. I spent about half my time for 4 years doing business in Russia. The way I'll describe it, it was sort of a cross between Rudyard Kipling and Damon Runyon. And it was, and maybe a sprinkling of the Twilight Zone. It was crazy, absolutely crazy. And again, life values, the things that we saw while we were there, the things that happened, it's indescribable. You say, people don't do that. I mean, I was in a restaurant, you see a woman go flying across the floor. Some guy hit her, a husband. And I said, what are you going to do? And they go like this, which means the guy's drunk, so it's okay. It really questions values. In Texas, of course, something happened, a guy did that to a woman, there'd be 6 guys demonstrating why he shouldn't have done it. And during that time, I was on a plane coming back from Moscow, and there were 3 16-year-old Hasidic girls, and they were just coming back from a summer camp where they were counselors in the Ukraine. And every once in a while, he sends me, and I get it. And I got into a deep philosophical conversation with them, and something said, something is important. And I gave my home telephone number to Nechama. Never saw her again in my life. I get a call from Daniel Goldstein. Daniel Goldstein is really her grandfather. He's also Rabbi Daniel Goldstein. And it turns out he was the former mayor of New Square, which is a Hasidic enclave. and says, Chana Moshe, you have to learn this. He's sending me books, and I'm learning. And he says, you have to come up to New Square. Okay, I come up to New Square. He said, you put on tefillin? I said, no. I was, one of the story about the rabbi who, bar mitzvah the mice, and they left. When I got my bar mitzvah, I left. And Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, I was there, but that's about as far as it went. And I went up there, I put on the tefillin, and I've never missed a day since. So from that, I learned, again, things, and I started to get involved with the community, the Jewish community. And there's something starting to come up in that. It was important. I didn't know what, but it was important. Some years later, I got involved in the oil business, and I started commuting out to Midland, Texas. And sometime after my wife at 38 years passed away, and the oil business looked pretty good. There was not a lot holding me in New York, and I went out to Midland, Texas. And there I started to really get it. Yiddishkeit, there wasn't any. There wasn't any. Subsequently, sometime after, I met a wonderful lady. We got married, and she says, we're making it in our house. She says, we'll invite people, we'll find them, wherever it is, and you'll be the rabbi. I said, I'm not a rabbi, I don't know how to do that. You're going to know it, that's it, you're going to do it. And so we started to do it, but what I learned was the absence of Yiddishkeit, the absence of belonging to a community. It became its own entity. They didn't understand my New York Jewish humor. My wife had to constantly say, he's just kidding. And so I knew at that point that I would never live outside a community again. And how did I get to San Antonio, Shavano Park? We drove. But actually, the grandchildren were here, so that was a good reason. And we moved here, the grandchildren moved back to Midland. Okay. But I found a wonderful community. I found a Jewish community that did everything. Shacharis, Mincha, Mariv. I tell you, showing up for Shacharis in the morning, it's very quiet. I like to get there a little early many times. There's nobody there. And as the fellas come in, we greet each other. We shake each other's hand. We give each other hugs like we didn't see them for 2 months. And it's wonderful. And no matter what life problems I carry in, they start to evaporate. By the time I leave, you're ready to start a day. It's wonderful. And what most impressed me, 3 years ago when I first started coming here, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Purim, Pesach, even Tisha B'Av, it was the best one I ever had in my life. And you know what's the ironic part? Every year after that was the better one than the one before, which was unbelievable. But where it came from was me participating in this community, getting myself, giving it up. It became personal. And I thank Rabbi Block and Rabbi Teldin, Rabbi Maris, and Rabbi Grossbaum. These are all wonderful, wonderful people. And if you have not participated in whatever community you're in, I strongly suggest that you will never believe the results in your life. Thank you.